Hello students, today we're going to be performing the Observing Chemical Changes lab. Now that you've read the background information and answered the pre-lab questions, let's go ahead and move on to the materials that you're going to be using for this lab. So every single table is going to get a basket that looks like this with all the materials that you're going to need, and each table is going to have two groups. So the groups, you're going to be sharing the chemicals, and each of you is going to get a well plate. So let me go through what the materials that you're going to be using are and how you're going to be using them. So make sure that you pay attention. So if you follow with me on your lab report setup, the first thing that it tells us that you're going to be using is a probe. This is a temperature probe. It's going to be in a bag, so make sure that you take it out of the bag and make sure that when you're done you put it back in the bag. And it looks like this, and if you notice, it has a little end that you're going to connect to the LabQuest, which looks like a calculator. This is it, and I'll show you guys how to use it, but basically you're just going to plug it in the probe to this end right here. If you notice, this end is going to match up with this end, and make sure that you do it carefully, both when you're plugging in and when you're taking it off. Okay, so make sure that you do it correctly, and I'll show you more on that next. The next piece of equipment that we're going to be using is the well plate. This is where you're going to be putting all the chemicals, and this is basically where you're going to be performing all the reactions. And I've given you this little background to help you see some of the reactions better, because it's kind of hard against the black table. So you're going to put this under your well plate so that you can observe some changes. The next thing that it tells you there is also toothpicks, so you can mix the chemicals, the reactions, and I've given you some like this, so you should have one per group. The next thing that it tells us, micro spatulas. If you notice, inside of each of the containers, you do have a little micro spatula that matches with the color on the top, so make sure that you're always using the correct color with the correct chemical. Okay, don't go using a blue one with the yellow one. Okay, so make sure that you always keep them correct, because again, you don't want to cross-contaminate. The next thing that it mentions, you are going to need a beaker. It's one of the first steps that it tells you. It's going to be a 400 milliliter beaker. And then the last two there are obviously your safety gear, which is your goggles and your aprons, which you guys should already have. In terms of the reagents that we're going to be using, the first 5, if you notice, are solids, and they're going to come in containers like this. This one is ammonium chloride, and if you notice, it does have a pictogram. This one means that it's an irritant, so make sure that you don't get it on your skin. If you do, make sure you wash your hands very quickly. And again, make sure that you always match the top with the spatula. What I would do is use one at a time and put back the spatula, put back the top. That way you don't confuse tops with the other chemicals. Okay, so make sure that you're very careful when you're getting the chemicals. The next one is what we call sodium bicarbonate, and that's the yellow one. The next one is calcium carbonate, that's the red one. The next one is what we call calcium chloride, and that's the green one. On this one, I am going to explain a little bit more, because this is what we call a hygroscopic chemical, which means that if you leave it exposed to the air, it's going to start to melt and eventually evaporate, and basically you end up losing all the chemicals. So for that, you need to close the container immediately after you use it. So please do not leave this one open, because then we'll lose all the chemical. And then the last one that's a solid is the soluble starch, and this one's in purple. The next ones are all in liquid solutions, and again, a solution is basically a mixture with water. The first one is what we call an iodine solution. Again, this one's an irritant. It comes with a droplet. The next one is a phenolphthalein solution, and this one can be hazardous to your health, so make sure that you handle it carefully. Okay, and only put as much as it tells you in the directions. The next one is barium chloride, and this one can be toxic. The next one is sodium sulfate solution. This one can be an irritant. The next one is acetic acid solution. This one can be flammable, toxic, and corrosive, so make sure that you're careful when handling it. The next one is sodium hydroxide, so toxic and corrosive. The next one is sodium bisulfate. This one can be an irritant. The next one is potassium iodide, which can be an irritant and an oxidizer. And the last one is just distilled water. Okay, so basically purified water. So those are all the chemicals that you're going to be using. Make sure that you read the directions carefully and that you follow step by step. Okay, if you have any questions, remember you always ask me first. If you have any doubt as to how you're supposed to do something, let me know. If you spill something, if there's any kind of accident, please let me know. Usually the sooner you tell me, the quicker we can assess what we need to do. Okay, so go ahead and let's get started.